Hi. During the fall of 2006, legendary American filmmaker Martin Scorsese released one of his classic crime thrillers, The Departed. The movie starred Leonardo DiCaprio, Mark Wahlberg, Jack Nicholson, Matt Damon, among others. The movie ended up being a critical and financial success and won several awards.
However, what fans of The Departed might not know is that 4 years earlier, during the winter of 2002, Hong-Kong filmmakers Andrew Lau and Alan Mak released the original concept from which The Departed was based on. A little movie called Infernal Affairs. A movie also starring some big names from China like Tony Leung, Andy Lau, and Anthony Wong, among others.
Both movies are similar yet so different. The Departed is not a typical remake walking in the same footsteps as Infernal Affairs. When the makers of The Departed decided to adapt the film, they made some massive changes. Infernal Affairs itself pushed the boundaries within the genre and deserves to be recognized as one of the greatest crime thrillers ever made.
In this video, we will be reviewing, dissecting, and comparing both movies, and at the end, we will crown the definitive winner of our little game.
Just remember, this is all for fun, and everything said here is purely based on opinions and not facts. And if you have your own opinions on these movies, do not hesitate to share them with us. Without further ado, it is time to answer the question, which is better?
Round 1. Story.
The story of both The Departed and Infernal Affairs is about a police officer successfully infiltrating the most notorious gang in the city, while a gang member successfully infiltrates the police force and becomes a mole for the same gang. The rest is a cat-and-mouse chase between the two as one tries to expose the other.
One thing we noticed was that the makers of The Departed copied a lot of the best scenes of Infernal Affairs nearly identically. To list a few, the scene where the police boss falls off the roof onto a car, which is so surprising and dramatic, when the mole working for the police recognizes the handwriting on the envelope, the scene where one mole spies on the other in the theater and then follows him through the streets at night, and when the mole working for the criminals shoots his associate in the elevator. Scenes like these were just already too cinematically good to change them very much in the adaptation, especially that last elevator scene I mentioned, where the mole who was groomed by the gang boss is saved from facing the law by another mole who suddenly reveals himself. Yes, there are so many moles involved that it's hard to keep them apart in your mind. That's kind of the whole thing about these movies. So then, the main bad guy mole immediately kills the accomplice that just saved his life. This part of the plot is so thrilling because the entire movie leading up to this point has been slowly building suspense regarding which mole is ultimately going to come out on top. We finally get to that point where, spoiler, the mole working for the criminals wins. So you would think that now the movie's over and all of the tension has deflated and they're just gonna wrap up the story with a nice little bow. But the drawn-out double crossing that has just come to an end is followed by another sudden murder, another right turn, leaving the viewer with a feeling like anything could happen next. However, there are some key differences between these two stories. The writers of The Departed added a few plot points that changed the story immensely. I mean, the two main moles are sleeping with the same woman. This twist on the character of Mary in Infernal Affairs, or Madeline in The Departed, adds a whole additional layer of betrayal and drama. She is literally in bed with the enemy. Although Madeline's character in The Departed definitely made the plot more gripping and tense, it was also pretty ridiculous, or larger than life. What kind of psychiatrist is this who just sleeps with every one of her patients?
Embarrassing!
I guess she is the perfect match for the police force that she works for, corrupt and unable to stay in her lane. Maybe that's what the writers of The Departed were trying to get at. Personally, I really enjoyed the ending of The Departed because it struck me as more fair. The bad mole, Sullivan, is suddenly killed at the last moment, leaving both of the main characters dead, which is kind of Shakespearean. In Infernal Affairs, the bad guy Lau comes out alive. Lau has a flashback which suggests that he regrets everything he did. Maybe for the Hong Kong writers, they considered this to be a fate worse than death, a fake life riddled with lies and remorse.
Written by Felix Chong and Alan Mak, Infernal Affairs is a movie that deals a lot with the duality of the characters. The story here is deeply interested in the characters' inner struggles, the biggest proof of it being the difference between DiCaprio and Leung's characters. DiCaprio's character, William Costigan, had only been undercover for a year during the events of this film, while Leung's character, Young Chun, was undercover for 10 years.
In The Departed, they write that Sullivan has been groomed to be a criminal since he was a young child, which seems like a little bit of a stretch. Infernal Affairs puts a lot more emphasis on the fact that the situation was not ideal for either party. They were both used as pawns, just by people that were on different sides of the law.
And while the audience will naturally side with the police, the movie does not suggest they are the good guys in this situation. And that is because Infernal Affairs is actually believed to be a criticism on Hong Kong's identity crisis in the early 2000s. And the whole trilogy is believed to be a metaphor on the relationship between mainland China and Hong Kong. There are many fan theories out there that suggest that one of the characters is supposed to represent Hong Kong. It is unclear, however, which one of the two characters fit that metaphor. Chen is the son of a criminal who tries to become a cop, trying to be on the right side of the law, unlike his family. Is that a commentary on Hong Kong trying to go back to its roots after the colonial era? Does Lau represent Hong Kong betraying its principles in favor of new principles introduced during that same colonial era? Who knows? Maybe that theory is a bit of a stretch, but given how layered the script is, I won't completely dismiss it. The story is not a typical crime thriller. It does not focus on action, but rather focuses on the characters it considers to be victims of both camps and only has empathy for the characters. It never glamorizes the life of a police officer and never makes crime life look cool.
For example, Infernal Affairs has a scene in the beginning where the two main characters, Lau and Chen, are sitting in an audio store comparing speakers. They are peacefully bonding over a shared interest. This part is gentle and creates a connection between the two characters that is somewhat lost in the absurd comedy of The Departed.
Written by William Monaghan, The Departed is a little more clear with its views. It wants you to feel sad for the death of Captain Quinnan. It wants you to hate Colin Sullivan, and it wants you to cheer during the scene. And that is normal because it was written by people with a different life experience. And this world fits the reality of the United States a lot better in the perspective of this writer. The greatest thing about The Departed is that it takes its time to build this world in a way that would make this vision unique.
It is a little more surface level than Infernal Affairs, but it is a lot better at managing the tension of every scene, and the dialogue is brilliant. Both Infernal Affairs and The Departed won major awards for their screenplays, which should not be surprising, given that they are both brilliantly written. Although The Departed introduced some new plot points that were interesting, Infernal Affairs just feels deeper and more realistic, less absurd.
In conclusion, both are great, but unfortunately, we can only have one winner. And because of how much more layered its script is, this round goes to Infernal Affairs.
Round 2. Filmmaking.
This is probably the most exciting round, simply because these are two movies that share the same story but are completely different in the execution. Infernal Affairs is more dramatic in its approach, while The Departed is one of Scorsese's funniest movies.
Can I talk to you for a second, please? You stupid.
And the difference in tone is not just demonstrated in the performances of the actors, but also in the filmmaking overall.
Andrew Lau and Alan Mak while directing Infernal Affairs, clearly wanted the movie to be taken seriously, and it is demonstrated by these drawn-out shots and the dramatization of key moments with slow motion. The editing is slick and makes good use of its runtime. The pacing of Infernal Affairs is probably its biggest strength. The movie does not waste a single second and never slows down, thanks to its sharp editing and the movie's overall ability to capture key moments in the most effective way, mixing music, slow motion, and great staging and blocking.
Scorsese, however, had a slightly different approach. We have already mentioned this was one of Scorsese's funniest movies, but it is also one of his best in terms of direction. The Departed is nearly an hour longer than Infernal Affairs, yet it is just as fast-paced and never feels like it's slowing down, and that is also thanks to his very bombastic editing that uses clever transitions, quick cuts, and the right amount of music and silence. While Infernal Affairs uses music, slow motion, and focus shots to dramatize its key moments, Scorsese presents them in a more shocking way.
I love how the filmmaking in Infernal Affairs really makes it a very unique experience thanks to its melancholic vibe.
And I also love how The Departed, thanks to its bigger budget, went the extra mile with a little more action, some great moments of levity, fantastic editing, and some of Scorsese's best directed scenes. Once again, both are great, but we can only choose one winner, and this round we have to go to The Departed.
Round 3. Cast/characters.
This is going to be fun. On one hand, we have some of the most stacked cast ever put together in a Hong Kong movie. And on the other hand, you have one of the best casts ever put together in a Hollywood production.
Comparing the main characters alone is a huge headache. DiCaprio is so good at portraying this broken, exhausted, and out-of-luck undercover cop, and Matt Damon is just so good at playing the corrupt cop. His character is irredeemable, but Damon always keeps that little shred of humanity within his character with his face acting and mannerisms. I wanted to hate his character, but I won't lie, he did not make it easy.
On the other hand, you have Tony Leung, who is just naturally likable. It's nearly impossible to hate this guy in any role. Even when he was playing a bad guy in Shang-Chi, I was still rooting for him. That's just how likable he is to me. Here, the way he plays this undercover cop is so good. It's almost a torture to watch. He plays a guy who has been undercover for 10 years, and his performance lets you feel his character's pain. And then you have Andy Lau, who plays the corrupt cop in a way we have never seen done before or after. He always had that cold-blooded look on his face, yet underneath his character, you could still feel the pain. Brilliant performances by all of these actors.
Which means that this round will be decided by the side characters. And unfortunately, in that department, it's not even close.
Between Jack Nicholson's over-the-top performance, Martin Sheen being the usual likable grandpa, Alec Baldwin randomly beating up IT guys, and of course, the most entertaining side character of all time, Sergeant Dignam.
Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe yourself.
Infernal Affairs did not stand a chance in this round, unfortunately. Round 3 goes to The Departed.
Round 4. Cultural impact.
Both The Departed and Infernal Affairs are extremely decorated movies, with The Departed being the very first remake of a foreign film to win Best Picture, long before Coda.
Many believe that the success of Scorsese's film is the reason that remakes of foreign films became such a trend in Hollywood. The Departed is also the very first movie to get Scorsese an Oscar for directing.
On the other hand, while Infernal Affairs' recognition was mostly local, its cultural impact is way beyond meaningless awards. Between the late 90s and the early 2000s, Chinese cinema was going through some form of crisis, and movies were forced to be made on a restricted budget. Filmmakers Andrew Lau and Alan Mack saw an opportunity to make a crime thriller more focused on human nature than action, and the result was a game changer.
Infernal Affairs inspired countless adaptations and parodies. Its influence is still felt today, and its remake is also one of the best crime thrillers ever made. I guess it's safe to say that this round also easily goes to Infernal Affairs. Uh-oh, it looks like we have a tie.
Okay, but this game cannot just end on a draw. We need a winner.
Okay, then we have no choice. It's time for an extra round!
Extra round. Soundtrack/score.
It is important to note that both movies use their score and soundtrack very effectively. For example, The Departed uses songs like Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones to set the mood for a scene, while Infernal Affairs can use rock music for the same purpose. However, only one of these two films rely on its score for critical moments in the film.
Indeed, while The Departed has an incredible soundtrack and a very good score, they are not the most memorable parts of the film, while Infernal Affairs does not work without those very memorable melodies. Not to mention, one of the very first scenes of Infernal Affairs calls attention to sound design and atmosphere through the scene in which Chan and Lau are sitting in the audio store comparing the different speakers. I have never seen a scene in a movie that so directly draws attention to not just music, but the actual quality of the tones and how this affects the way music feels. Of course, this will leave the audience with a more focused ear as they compare the subtle difference between the two amplifiers alongside the main characters.
The winner of this round and the winner of this episode is Infernal Affairs.
Let me tell you, it was not easy to decide this one.
Yeah, both movies are very good, and honestly, I'm surprised that The Departed didn't win. It is literally my favorite of the two.
But at the end, all that matters is that both films get to be celebrated and appreciated for what they are.
I agree. I love them both. It was a great experience doing this comparison, and I hope we get to do more in the future. If you want more battles of the doppelgangers, let us know in the comments. Thanks a lot, Audrey, for helping with this video.
And thank you for having me, Fred. I had not seen either of these movies before making this, so I'm really glad that I did.
As for me, I'll see you all next time. Thank you for watching. Ciao!